up over to. All right, now we're live on YouTube.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're just before show chatting about old programming languages, because Dave used to use punch cards and stuff. So, um,
Most
you know.
definitely. 5080 cards, they were called.
Oh
How long
goodness.
ago was that?
That
Oh,
would be 1978.
there you go.
Some
Too
of
long
us were
ago.
alive then, but not too many of us in this video chat.
Nope. All right, so yeah, I did a little bit of basic and modern languages. Obviously, a little bit of HTML, CSS, and played around with Ruby a little bit a while back, but that's about it. But that's more Dan and Dave's world, I think, and maybe some in Alex's too. So anyway, we'll get started. That's neither here nor there. So, light news week this week. For those of you who don't know who we are, we've got Dan, Alex, myself, and Dave, and Blunty. And it's good to have Blunty back. He had a little bit of a cross country move, so good to have him back with us this week, and definitely been missed. So, um, but I do want to get started with the two articles that are of some interest. Let me get my screen shared here. I don't know if anybody's been around long enough. I've talked about this gentleman a long time ago, back when we were first kind of starting out. But this is Ryan Laidman. He came out to Arizona here a couple years back to try and go for the Guinness World Record of drone speed. And I was able to meet with him out in Scottsdale where he was making the attempt several years ago. And he had custom designed a drone that he was using to break the record. And we did a lot of filming. It was a fun day. I went for my own world record, which he then promptly beat the next day, but that was really cool for him. Mine was the vertical to 100 meters. Um, Ended up wrecking my. I did it with a Impulse RC Helix, and I think I did about 2 point. I can't remember 2.7 or 3.7 seconds, and then he promptly smashed it by an entire second the next day with his custom made drones. But it was a fun day. But just recently, a couple days ago, he came back out to Arizona. I was not there for this. This is a picture of his drone. And achieved an average speed of 224 miles an hour with a custom designed drone. Um, and the top speed during his fastest run was 235.68 miles per hour. This gentleman's been after this for a long time. He previously, I don't know what he used in terms of specs for this thing. It doesn't detail that out. I'm sure he'll release some of that on his own website.
He's got a
Um,
he's got a page with all that stuff. If you click on
does he?
the
I'll be right
video,
here.
yeah, from
Oh,
the
here.
video, he's got links in the description to the
Okay,
Guinness
cool.
record, and then he's also got a link to his website where he goes through the build process and the specs
Oops.
and all kinds of stuff. So,
Let's skip the ad here.
yeah,
Oh,
that first
sorry.
link
Here
there.
we go.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, brief overview. Started in late 2016 to see if he could break 150 miles an hour. He hit 172 using a 5S. Um, let's see. And then he did the XLR1, which was enough for 195.99. So, didn't have the witnesses. I think that's the one I witnessed or I was there for. And then he started going out again. This is the same exact place that he did it before. So he did it with a 6S LiPo, 35 amp ESCs, Cobra 2207 2450 kV motors, um, HGLRC Zeus, VTX, an F7.
Only
controller.
35 amp ESCs?
Yeah. I mean, he
That's
did it
amazing.
with all off-the-shelf parts, about a $400 build from what I read.
Wow.
And then I have one of his frames that he sent me, and literally the motor mounts is just bent 1 millimeter thick carbon fiber, and it's just held in tension by the motors at the end. It's really cool. It's basically just a flying battery. You put the battery in the core of the thing, and that's how it works. But he used a Caddx Ant, APC 5.2 by 6-inch propellers. So pretty good rock there. So the video, it shows in the video. Let me skip back over to here. Let me replay this. But his battery goes from full to empty in seconds. It's insane. You can watch down in the bottom left. He's at 4. He's kind of getting oriented. And it just goes too low for it to even be detected once he starts his runs. Let me skip it forward a little bit here. And it just empties the tank. It's just
I guess
so
that's
much.
saying he's efficient as turning electricity into speed. Well, at least getting as much electricity out of his battery as fast as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just insane. And he's doing this all with a 6S battery, which is pretty cool. The previous record was held by Drone Racing League, and I think they did it with like a 12S battery. It was
I thought it was
a lot of battery.
10S.
It might be, yeah.
10 or
but
8S.
he really wanted to, and that one burst into flames, I believe. And so he really wanted to push it with a commercially viable build, and just really rock it out. He's a really good guy. I believe he comes from Michigan, so really cool thing. He changed the design a bit, and it looks great. But just really neat to see him finally get recognized for all the hard work he's put into that. I wrote
It sounds like there's no streamlining. It's just raw power. Or
so
does it?
everything's aerodynamic. So
Okay.
before he talked a lot about aerodynamics and stuff when I was able to kind of interview him and talk with him. Before originally he didn't have any cowling over his motors, and his
There we
motors were
go.
forward facing. This is the old design.
Okay.
And the tube on here is all carbon fiber 3D printed, specifically designed for this by one of the guys he was working with, that I believe was a aerospace engineer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of that. The shape makes a lot of sense. Now that's the
Yeah.
older design.
Yes,
Looks like a missile.
it does.
Agreed.
Yeah, 100%. And then the newer one, you can see he added cowlings, reversed his motors to be pushers instead of pullers, and
Is it
everything's
sitting on like a
aerodynamic.
launch stand, or is that something that
It
goes
is.
with it?
I think it's a launch stand, and I don't know if I can blow
That's
this
cool.
picture up.
Boy, my hat's off to him for using off-the-shelf equipment. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I imagine that gray
yeah.
part at the bottom stays behind, and it
Yeah,
makes it possible to
So-
take off.
yeah, and I mean, you can see by the positioning of the camera, you take off vertically and then you rotate it into position to actually do the run. And it has to be 2 passes on a flat run, one in one direction and one in the opposite direction. And those get averaged together, and that's how you get your Guinness World Record. So
Very cool.
yeah.
And two blades. Fascinating.
Yeah, all 4 motors have bi-blades on them.
Yeah. So really incredible that he was able to do this, and it was really cool because I was able to talk to him on the first try that he did this, and I wrote an article for Get FPV back in the day on it, and his fastest was 202 before, and so he smashed that by a significant margin.
So did he have to
like
get any
200.
kind of waiver to do this?
So they do talk about that. let's see. See if I can get back to. Here we
Because
go. So
flying recreationally, there isn't really the same speed limit, but if you're doing this for any other reason,
like a
So-
world record.
So the FAA limits the speed of UAS or drone to 100 miles per hour, but like the speed limits on a road, it doesn't actually limit how fast a drone can fly. As with any vehicle, there are enthusiasts obsessed with going faster and faster. Last time we checked, let's see. Those trying to push the limits of what a quadcopter can do was the Drone Racing League and managed to set a speed record of 163. Speeds like that put a tremendous strain on the drone's electric motors and battery packs, and during testing, one of the DRL's prototypes actually burst into flame when pushed to its max speed. According to the FAA, you can request a waiver of most operational restrictions if you can show that your proposed operations can be conducted safely. So Laidman headed out to the sparse deserts of Arizona with his XLR V3.
so they at least understand that there's a waiver process, and maybe they
Mhm.
did something with that. But either way, flying out in the middle of the desert is going to be pretty safe.
Yeah. And let's see. So with its weighs in at around 490 grams, almost half the weight of DRL's Speed Demon, but uses off-the-shelf electronics, including batteries, electric motors, Livestream camera, and even propellers, which cost about $400. So, yeah.
That's
So the
fantastic.
official record.
What a great
now
piece of work.
Yeah, official record now stands at 224 miles per hour, but his peak speed was 235.68.
Now let's see him go through gates at 200 miles an hour.
And it's
Maybe
funny
a
'cause-
40 by 40 opening.
well, one of the things that he talked a lot about was propeller tip speed, and as propeller tip speed start to approach the sound barrier, you start to get a lot of turbulence and whatnot, and this was a huge limiting factor he felt for him. And this is something that even like engineers at NASA and others have tried to solve, um, because I mean theoretically a propeller
Dread,
can drive something to the speed of sound, but practically is a different story, right? So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
dreaded tip vortices, which is why it's really interesting that he's using bi-blades, because
Mhm.
to slow the prop down, you'd use a tri-blade or a quad blade.
Yeah,
Get yourself more area. So I'm sure he's found the right recipe.
yeah,
A lot of
obviously.
respect.
So pretty incredible. Um, so I really wanted to spend some time on that. And then last, like everyone else, Amazon's drone delivery unit just hit with layoffs as a 10-year-old project finally launches. So,
Who would have guessed?
Yeah, I heard
but
80% of the drone unit was laid off.
yeah.
Wow,
And
how
as
do you
a
conduct anything with losing 80% of the group?
Well, once you get the product built, right, you got a little bit of.
Yeah.
Well, most companies carry on with that, but yeah, I
Huh.
mean, if they dumped all of the R&D, you know,
Yeah. So
they've been
Yeah,
talking
it's
for years about it dying. I mean, we did a story like on the news like a year and a half ago
Mhm.
about Amazon
Right.
reporting
right where they
huge
shut
layoffs
they
and
shut
Every
down
two years.
a UK unit. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
they completely
Yeah.
shut that down.
Yeah.
So
Having
I think we're seeing like that work come out, but as far as like where it goes after this and stuff, I don't really know what we're gonna see. Amazon still has that idea of 5-pound packages like 7 miles out, you know, and I
Mhm.
just don't know that that's going to be feasible for them, especially with the way that program's gone so far, you know.
yep.
Yeah.
It's funny with these with with how they just laid off part of their drone team because they were hiring people for the drone team not too long ago. Like there were ads for it for them hiring.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I do know the plan was to slash 18,000 jobs across all of Amazon and its little subsidiaries. So Primera is losing a significant number of their employees. Sources familiar with the matter who asked not to be named said they learned about the Primera cuts on Wednesday when two senior Amazon executives sent emails to employees notifying them that those impacted by the layoffs would be informed shortly. one person
Yeah.
realized what was happening when they can no longer access Slack. That's the worst way to find out. It's like you've
Not
been
only
turned
not
off.
only that it's illegal, and that's been reported as well. It's a violation of the WARN Act. You have with the numbers greater than 60 employees being laid off, you have to give employees 45 days. But as the conjecture is so fine, they'll just pay the
them for
fine.
the next 45. Yeah.
But it's it's really unconscionable to lay people off without notice and now giving them a chance to go find a job.
So we'll see what happens in the near future. They're still saying Primary is in existence and still operating, but
has
we'll see what
anybody
happens.
actually gotten a drone delivery? Because don't they have a fairly large area in like Bentonville or something that they're delivering to?
That's
think they
not
just
Amazon.
opened.
That's Walmart.
It's Drone Up
Yeah.
and Zip.
Oh,
Yeah, that's all
right.
been Walmart. But
Walmart.
I think Amazon literally just opened. I think that's what the part of this is.
I think
they're literally
Amazon is
just-
operating in California currently. Primary is operating in California, if I remember correctly. Whereas Walmart's operating in most of the southern states: Arizona, New Mexico, Texas.
And Google Wing had over 100,000 flights in Australia, and now they're moving into the United States.
One of these days, I'll try and get a Walmart drone delivery. See how
I think the wing model seems like a good model. You know, they're basically not doing anything on their own. They're literally just partnering with people. I mean, that's kind of what Drone Up's doing too. But Walmart's basically going to every Walmart. That makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can get the economy of scale down to a point where they can roll. You know, they're talking about basically, rolling up a half of a shipping container, dropping it outside a pizza place, and then delivering pizzas for them. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. It'll be interesting to see if that's the kind of economy of scale that can happen. So.
Yeah,
I don't
Josh,
know if I want drone delivered hot food. Gets cold by the time it's delivered. I know
Josh,
from experience.
You gotta.
You can put it next to the motors.
You gotta do a road trip just to go someplace to get a drone delivery and check it out. Write an article on it.
So probably about 15 miles north of me is where one of the Walmarts locally, and we did a news article on it the other day. I think last week, on where the people in Surprise, was it the Surprise or Peoria, Glendale area, where they weren't too happy about it. So, but yeah, I'll have to figure out how I can get a drone delivery. I'm not sure that they're available in my specific area yet.
TextJet saying he lives 3 miles away from a Walmart that does drone delivery and they don't serve his neighborhood.
Yeah, that's one of the big things about drone delivery is
I think
and
there's still
Walmart's been pushing really hard for last mile. Like it's like last mile or last mile and a half is like a big thing, and that's why Amazon seems crazy because they're like pushing for that 5 to 7 miles and trying to get 5 pounds that far. It's like a whole different scale. It's like a whole different ball game, you know.
Yeah.
I believe Drone Up is still on VLOS too. They don't have BVLOS yet, from what I've heard.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Which would explain the very short service area.
I think they have one large service area, but that's where they're doing the it's not Drone Up, but the other one where they do the slingshot planes, zipline, yeah.
Zipline. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe Drone Up is still VLOS.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't fly. You can't deliver very far away if you have to keep it within visual line of sight, unless you're standing on top of a tall tower or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Drone delivery, who knows what's going to happen, if it's going to scale like Plenty was saying. Is it possible to get it scaled properly to make it functional?
Well, and then the question is how much of this is based on how much these prices, like they were talking in chat about $3 deliveries, how much of this is based on subsidizing by big tech dumping money into this? Like, and then when will that pay off? Like, is Walmart making money? Is Drone Up making money on $3 deliveries? I seriously doubt that. They're just betting on the fact that they will make money as this scales, I'm gonna guess,
Yeah. Well, so. I will say, Walmart is a company that tries to innovate in different ways. I mean, there were robots scanning shelves in Walmart and whatnot. So, I mean, they've got a heavy R&D, tech division. So, we'll see what happens. They've had some misses, they've had some wins, and so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So in terms of articles, that's all I've got. It's been a little bit of a slow week from that standpoint. But Dave, what do you got, sir?
Good news on our team. We're adding a team member. Rob is from law enforcement. He has his Part 107 and FCC ham radio license. He supervises 33 public safety officers who fly UAS. He supports the NFL, the NCAA, and Major League Baseball to help get TSA waivers where there are of course, temporary flight restrictions. And he is also, like Alex, a FAST team member. So we feel that he'll be a fantastic addition to the team and welcome him aboard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any Brian is asking if there's any status update on FRIAs.
We did get a response back from the individual that we are working with to set up some time. They asked us if we'd put together a set of questions, so we turned that around, shared it with FTCA, sent in a set of questions across our team here, as well as the Flight Test Community Association. Sent that in. Got a thank you from the FAA yesterday morning, and said they'll be back to us, hopefully with a get together in the next week or so.
Yeah, didn't they say they were going to get back to us by the end of that day with more information? But maybe I'm remembering that wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was a couple days ago.
You gotta expand everything out, Dan. I mean,
the FAA's days are longer than ours.
Yeah, it was like
days.
I'll get that to you next week. And we didn't ask which next week.
But soon, hopefully soon. I don't know. I mentioned in our video we were hopefully going to have more information at the beginning of February, so I hope they don't make me a liar.
The upside is they're not ghosting us; they're talking to us and they're responding, and that's big. And so that's great. In addition, we have, for those probably noticed, there is a fourth CBO. Please tell me if I'm getting it right. STEM plus C, is that the name of the company? Yep. And Paul, and I'll probably murder his last name, Kaup, K-A-U-P, I believe is Paul's last name, is the founder of that firm. And they've been doing STEM for about 10 or 15 years. And Paul's an airline pilot. And so he and I will set up a chat. So we've been back and forth. Looks like we have some different views on remote ID. Hopefully we can come to a consensus on that. So we welcome and congratulate STEM plus C for being recognized by the FAA as a CBO, the fourth CBO.
Yep, 100%. Good to have more players in the field, even if there's differences of opinion. I mean, that invites discourse and allows us to kind of talk through stuff. So it's a good deal.
Yeah, we should just throw a little plug out there for our Discord server where some people were talking about that new CBO earlier today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can, if you want to join the Discord server, you can go to our website. There's a permalink there if you want to join. And definitely grab that and get in here. There's always a lot going on. There's, how many channels, different channels do we got going on? Probably 15 different channels, with everything from tech support from other community members to news, regulations, safety, education, all kinds of different stuff going on. So there's always a conversation going.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a little quiet, and then sometimes it's very not quiet.
Yeah.
I'll come back after not looking at it for a few hours and realize there's hundreds of messages.
But it's a great community. And if you've got questions or concerns, or maybe you just want to troubleshoot with somebody, there's somebody there that can probably help you. So it's a good deal, and we get in there and respond to stuff pretty regularly. A lot of Dan getting in there. Dan's a great leader in that community, and Blenty as well. So
the other thing I wanted to mention was the FCC NPRM. So the FCC's Notice for Public Rulemaking that that references allocation of protected spectrum for UAS. So on the face of it, very good thing. It's a 114-page NPRM, I got about halfway through it. It's mostly questions, and so there is some assertion of what might happen. There's also suggestions on things like sharing the spectrum with cell phone providers. So someone would have to release spectrum if it gets saturated or in use. So that doesn't. I just don't see how that makes sense. But what is really interesting, why I wanted to bring it up again, is the NPRM was supposed to have been released on or about January 4. Then there's a 60-day comment window. So we were scrambling to get that. And thank you, Alex, for double checking. The NPRM has not been released in the Federal Register, which means that 60-day clock has not started. Back in 2021, I led a subgroup in the Drone Advisory Committee, Tasking Group 6, on this topic. And so I'm reaching out to a number of folks who participated in that to see if they have any responses or reactions. And so I'm sure that someone will say, "Oh yes, I just spoke with so and so at the FCC, and this is what they told me." So it's a very important NPRM. It is brutal to get through. I think I spent about 5 or 6 hours just getting through half of it, and it is deep, and it's referencing lots of FCC. So it's a whole nother set of jargon and regulations that coming from aviation we're not necessarily attuned to. How's that for a pun? And yeah, thank you, Dan. That's
Hopefully
it.
that's the right link. That they're not posted in the same place the FAA ones are, right? It looks
correct.
different.
Yep, different, and yeah. So very important. We do want protected and allocated spectrum to operate. What's very disconcerting is there's a lot of discussion about slicing it up, slicing and dicing the spectrum that we currently use for commercial. And they, in passing, mention recreational use, but it's and they talk a lot about monetizing licensing spectrum. So that's troublesome in that goes against the FCC charter. So I'm sure that will be one of our comments, is that hit us up again for yet another fee is not going to be well received. So we'll see what happens. But other work with the 2 tasking groups coming along. We are, that's tasking group 14 and 15. 14 is the beyond visual line of sight. What can industry do to accelerate early rule creation or rule updates to enable beyond visual line of sight? TG15 is helping drone operators and AAM operators perform a community outreach. So you're going to launch a program or a set of operations in an area. How do you get to the public? How do you get to the people who are stakeholders and let them know and get their okay and approval if required? So good piece of work. Great group of folks pitching in on that one. And so we're targeted to wrap up both of those tasking groups in time for the March. I don't think the date's quite set, but it's probably on or around 16 to 20 March. And nothing new on the Counter UAS Aviation Rulemaking Committee. That was, we anticipate in February. Haven't heard anything on that.
Cool. All right, so we got, let's see, Dave may shoot you a message later about an interview opportunity. I'm gauging interest from the production area first. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Send him an email. Dave likes email.
Email. Yeah, I love email. In all seriousness, that would be preferable. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah. Blunty, what do you got? Anything?
Do you have a new video card yet?
Nope. Sure don't.
Oh, man.
Bummer.
We need to get Blunty a video card.
Yeah, yeah, that's unfortunate. But no, I don't. Nothing pressing. So
Okay. Alex, anything for us?
No, not really. Racing's just as it is, and the season's out there. Not much else going on. Well, Wootopia also. I think that was last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That finished up. People seem to have fun at that. There was some drama in the racing community. Also earlier with MLDR and AK stepping down.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, smooth sailing.
And
Alright.
is that what was the race that you mentioned in February? Is it on Long Island? Is that public, open to the public?
Yeah, it's open to the public, but yeah, that's just a general tiny whoop race that's local to the area. There's
Okay.
others all across the country, so
Yep.
Great.
yeah.
Cool. Dan, anything from you, sir?
Nothing from me, but over on YouTube, at the beginning of our live stream, Jason Black was asking, with remote ID on its way, is Lance dead? And I think he was sort of getting at, shouldn't all we need to do to comply with the regulations is, fire up Lance and get approval to go fly? How would you guys respond to a question like that? Is Lance dead?
So
Nope.
no, Lance is completely separate from remote ID. So the easiest way to put it is Lance is required in any airspace, any controlled airspace, with the exception of Class G, which is technically uncontrolled airspace. So, Lance is required to fly within those areas. Controlled airspace is generally going to be airspace where there's heavier traffic, generally around airports, helipads, stuff like that. And filing a request through Lance is required to fly in those spaces. Generally, they will, if you look at, you can go to the UAS facility maps, which will give you an idea of where those controlled airspaces are, as well as a maximum ceiling for any kind of flight within those areas. So they generally go from 0, which would be closest to the airports, especially at the ends of the runway where planes are taking off and landing, all the way up to 400 feet in those spaces. And a lot of times when you apply for Lance, you will, get a maximum ceiling, and it may be lower than that. And, depending on what kind of waiver or opportunities there are, it could be a little higher. But you have to kind of put in the times you're flying and whatnot. So remote ID is completely separate. That's what they're calling the license plate in the sky, right? It's giving your information on where you're taking off from, and where you're flying, what your vectors are, how high you are, etc. And as well as a couple different things in terms of, with standard remote ID, troubleshooting messages and whatnot. So completely different. Remote ID is for identification, where Lance is for authorization. So two separate systems working in conjunction with each
But I
other.
can
Yeah, there
sort of
is.
see how the two could have overlapped, or there is some overlap.
Mhm.
Like, let's say I'm flying in controlled airspace, or you're near an airport and you see a drone. You could bring out your remote ID app and it could reference Lance and say, oh, the only person authorized to fly here via Lance is this drone, and it tells you
Mhm.
everything about him because Lance knows everything about him. But
Right.
that's not what the FAA chose to do. And we could also go back to the original NPRM and our response
Yeah.
when they were talking about network remote ID and everything. And I think we said something in our response saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if remote ID worked like Lance, where you bring up an app on your phone, you say, I'm flying in this area, I don't need a
Nope.
module on my drone. Everything you need to know about me is from a Lance-like application that would be in all airspace. But again, that's not the direction the FAA chose to go.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's a
it's
notify and fly, and
yeah.
Aloft is using that, and I could see the tie-in as well, Dan, where you could say, well, if I use notify and fly, then I've defined a 3-dimensional volume where I'm going to fly. So why do I need remote ID? and
Yeah.
it's we feel a pretty legit point, but it's not exactly
Not the way
agree with
they
you.
roll.
It's not the way the FAA is taking it right now.
Yeah. So notify and fly was really the answer that we were pushing for over remote ID, because it just makes a whole lot of sense. And there's an older video from flight tests where they were working with Google Wing and showcased notify and fly, and it was a great showcase. It just didn't roll out that way. So, and again, this doesn't necessarily. I want to reiterate this point when it comes to what the FAA is doing versus what they're mandated to do. So, it wasn't that notify and fly wasn't an option, but Congress mandated remote identification in the Reauthorization Act of 2018. So this was mandated from Congress. The FAA had to move on it. It's part of their, in order to receive money from the federal government for all their programs, this is what they need to do. So keep in mind that a lot of this stuff that we're so unhappy with the FAA for, a lot of that unhappiness and ire is misplaced. So a lot of this does come from Congress, and I encourage you, if you see something you don't like, or if you hear of something that's in the works that you don't like, reach out to your Congress people. I don't care how you vote, and get out and have that line of communication with the people who are supposed to represent you.
Speaking
It's
about
easy to do.
contacting congressmen, what can our members do about the upcoming FAA 2023 Reauthorization Act and contacting their representatives?
So one of the things you can do is reach out and do we have that form up, Dan? Have we finalized that yet? I
I
think we're
feel
still
like we
working on it.
haven't finished what we were starting on, and that was a long time ago.
So
Oh,
no. We
I
were
think I did.
working on it last
I
week.
think I did
Oh, that
update
one.
it, so it's real
Yeah,
close. So we have
yeah.
so this is a great discussion, and might be a couple of days ahead of where we were ready, but we've made we created back in October. We created a set of items that we would have as requests to Congress for the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act. We then had another contact with a congressional staffer on the aviation subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, and we have an opportunity to send and have a discussion, hopefully, with the House. And as we had mentioned, the act is both bicameral and bipartisan, so that's beneficial. We will communicate early and often. And so I think what we can and should do is provide that. Here's what we're asking, and if your congressional representative or senators are on one of the two aviation subcommittees, give them a call, send them a note, and you'll have the steal any of the points that that we'll put forward as things that that we feel from listening to the community are important for the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act. Sound like
So
a plan?
yes, totally sounds like a plan.
So what section?
Yeah, I'm pulling that for him
TextX
right now.
asking what section of the Reauthorization Act dictated remote ID, and can someone give me a reference?
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
44809. It's in that document. Or
Mhm.
I don't remember which part of 44809. I think it might be just in the general bullet points.
I will get that to you.
I'm guessing it's all over the place in that Reauthorization Act, but
Yeah.
a handful of things.
Yeah, the one thing that was not in the Reauth Act was FRIAs. That came out of the rule RID rule.
Yes. Let's see. So
It's in the
it
document.
is.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
Section
Section
375.
44809 is the exception to Part 107.
Let's see. Permit the
Do you-
testing of various remote identification and tracking technologies evaluated by the Unmanned Aircraft Systems Identification and Tracking Aviation Rulemaking Committee.
I'll be right back.
And while Josh is looking that up, if anybody else has any other questions we can answer before we're done tonight, please let us know. Whether that's over in the YouTube channel in the chat, the Discord chat, or if you want to speak up on your microphone, go for it. Whoa, KBS Ken has a pasted a long one in there.
Section 375 text jet is where you want to be in the reauthorization. I've started a dialogue with one of my senators regarding remote ID modules and Part 107 operations. I talked with her about how I felt that remote ID provides little to no value, in my opinion, regarding safety of the national airspace. Depending on how things go, I may try to get an audience with her or her staff and illustrate the one-size-fits-all issues we see. With example, my 350-gram drone treated like a big threat.
Yeah, so we can point out, for people who don't know, for remote ID, there's a call out that says if you home build your own drone, you can buy a remote ID module and put it on it and go fly outside, and that meets the remote ID rules. But if you're using this for something that's not recreational, so let's say you're hired to do a film set and you want to build your own Cinelifter, you can't put a module on that and comply with remote ID. You have to buy a Cinelifter from a company basically who's gone through all the manufacturing requirements to have standard remote ID that broadcasts the location of your radio and all that in order to do any Part 107 work. And what we and lots of people feel is that that's just not acceptable. There should be a way that you could home build a drone for Part 107 use and put a module on it, and it meets plenty of the safety requirements of remote ID.
Right. And we've had what Dan is saying verified twice, and the second time by the FAA Remote ID Project Office. So we're certainly not happy about it. And it is a change of their position from January 2021. But that's the situation, and it's really not good.
So there's a comment there about BV loss for recreational FPV flyers.
I don't think they're in our chat.
That's it's in the general.
No. The person themselves are not listening to us. I think they're just typing in the general chat.
It says, are there any info when BV loss will be possible for recreational FPV flyers?
Well, it's not likely unless something changes in the Reauthorization Act for 2023. Basically, that's the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, the BV loss right now is very restricted, with certain companies and contractors and whatnot getting access to that kind of playing field. But there's a lot of hoops that they have to jump through in order to do that. Either they're working in one of the UAS corridors, or they're implementing kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Walmart.
And if there is, it will be a long road. And so if we think about the timeline for BV loss, we just did for Part 107. We just concluded remember, this is FAA just concluded. This is March 2022. We just wrapped up the BV loss arc. And so now a year later, they're coming back and saying, well, could you tell us what we might be able to do first if the industry helps? And that's literally what the tasking group that the AAC, or the Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee, has asked, and that's the comeback in March of 2023. We can anticipate that it will be several years between the conclusion of the ARC and the first NPRM. Then it would make sense that it might be another year until we see a rule for BV loss. So we're talking 4 years for 107. Then at that point, once we've nailed that down, we will hopefully have a leg to stand on and some data that we'll be able to point to. Why can't we also add this to 44809? That's the path. It's not a guarantee, and it's a long path. There are some of the work we're doing. I'm optimistic that we might get some shorter runway pun intended, BV loss or extended virtual line of sight, visual line of sight, waivers or moving from a waiver into Part 107, which would be very positive. Then we could shorten the path to recreational. So apologize for a long answer. It's a good question.
Everybody needs to keep in mind, and we've nailed this down to a science, is that the FAA operates on black hole time. So they're flying close to a black hole. We're all just going normal time. It's time dilation, y'all.
Ooh.
Yeah, and they're not punished at all for taking their time apparently. So
no.
Reminds me when I told a professor he had the memory of a fish, which was measured in nanoseconds.
That's the only explanation for it. You know, stuff that was supposed to be here 5 years ago is just now rolling out. So
yeah, in the wrong sequence.
Yeah, a little bit. So
right.
Anyway, it that's government for us. So all right.
Yeah, if only they took so long to leave things the way they were, like the old rules about not making rules for recreational, or leaving recreational alone and taking a long time to make rules against it. That would be fine. But the way they've gone, it's not so great.
So
yeah, and there's a good point here. The FAA was trying not to indefinitely delay Part 108. Of course, 108 is a phrase that we made up in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee. It's not anything that has any formality behind it. However, it's viewed as a very positive delineation between, okay, we can enhance 107 a bit, and then we really need something else, additional training, additional certification, etc. Still not a practical in all likelihood. However, you're flying something that's heavy, you're flying it for hundreds of miles away. I like the idea of someone having a little more training who's going to have that sort of responsibility. So I think and if you think about it, there are a lot of financial interests that are keenly interested in that, both in small UAS as well as AAM. So hopefully we can see movement on what we would term Part 108.
Yeah, so if I remember right, to add on to a little bit of what you just said, so during the Beyond Visual Line of Sight rulemaking committee, they were talking about what rules would require, say, a whole new Part 107 Part 108, where you might need to take a test and prove you're really capable of things, and what could be added on to an existing Part 107 that's relatively safe but could get you some beyond visual line of sight capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was all just what was proposed to the FAA, and who knows, someday we'll eventually see what they decide to do.
Right. So definitely an interesting conversation. Elephant in the room. How do we get rid of the visual observer rule? So,
well, every Part 107 pilot should apply and obtain a flying without a spotter waiver, and then fly safely. And then the FAA will likely have to move on that.
Right, and there are several that are granted, and they're becoming more and more commonplace. That one is the eliminating the visual observer totally is going to run into significant hurdles with the Helicopter Association International and AOPA, among others. So that one's, it makes a ton of sense. But it's we do, I agree completely with what Dan's saying. That's what we're going to try, and that's what we should be going for. We will hit significant Crewed Aircraft Association resistance.
So I just want to kind of wrap up for TextJet on the information he was asking for. So I believe it's 375. No, I apologize. It is 376. Blunty is correct. So they talk about remote ID early on, about assessing the need for it, and then below they said shall require that UTM services include an assessment of various components required for the necessary risk reduction and mitigation in relation to the use of UTM services, including remote identification of both cooperative and non-cooperative unmanned aircraft systems in the national airspace system. And then they go on to say, let's see, where was the other one I saw? Let's see, completion of UTM system pilot program. Ensure that the UTM system pilot program is established in Section 2208 of the FAA Extension, Safety, and Security Act of 2016. It's conducted to meet the following objectives of a comprehensive UTM system by the conclusion of the pilot program. Permit the testing of various remote identification and tracking technologies evaluated, and then they have to implement, include an assessment of various components required for necessary risks. It's the implementation plan contents. The plan required by the subsection shall include an assessment of various components required for the necessary risk reduction and mitigation in relation to the use of UTM services, including remote identification. So, sorry, that's a long thing to get to. Identifying, testing, and rolling out remote identification.
And if you're in there reading Section 376, you can glance back to Section 374 and get a little background on the FCC NPRM.
Yeah. So, yeah, it gets. No, you're fine, TechChat. I don't mind. This is what we do, right? So,
Oh yeah, we
If you
love
don't-
to read regulations and find things in them. It's
Look,
so
if
much
you
fun.
haven't read something, if you haven't read something in a regulation, I mean, my opinion, if you haven't read something in a regulation, go read it. Like it's good to learn where that stuff is and how they write it and what they tell
Mhm.
people and like how they organize it, where it comes from, and like I think it's very positive to say like where is this actually at in the actual regulation
Mhm.
and learn the
Yep.
language that they use and how it was implemented and how it was added and all those things are super important. So,
Yep, totally
Yeah,
agree with
absolutely.
you. On the other hand, we're also here to try to
Yes.
help everybody else who doesn't have the time or isn't going to do that, try to summarize it
Yep.
and help them understand it.
Yeah.
And we're also really good at picking these apart. Dan especially is really great at picking it apart, playing devil's advocate, and getting to the meat and potatoes of stuff. So, that's what we do. We want to try and interpret this stuff for the lay person, so that if you don't have the time or you don't have the energy to make it through all 400 and 500 pages of the
Yeah.
FAA reauthorization
Also,
document, we can get that to you.
Also, just a hot tip for people who are learning this stuff. Control F is your friend,
Yes.
and you just got to learn the term they use. You can sometimes look at the top for definitions to find the term they use, but you're basically just like trying to figure out. In this case, it is remote ID. You can Control F remote ID, but a lot of times you're like trying to come up with, if you Control F FRIA, you're not going to find, you have to Control F FAA identified, like it's that sort of thing. So you
Yeah.
learn those terms, and then you can kind of dig through them pretty quickly. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's super dense. This stuff is super annoying to get through, and yeah, we're happy to try to help you
It's
find it.
almost like you have
So,
to learn a second language before you can read it
yeah.
properly.
Yeah, you do sometimes.
Right. Yeah, and this
All
is what's
those
killing me with the
acronyms, all
FCC one.
alphabets.
It's yet another language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike FPV asks, hasn't the FPV community already proven that flying without an observer is safe? And as Dan said, yeah, we have, but not the way the FAA wants, and we
Look,
have to
the
play by
FAA
their rules.
Yeah, the
And
FAA sincerely believes that we all fly with spotters. I mean, to be honest with you, that is their genuine belief. And
and we're flying video drones that go 10 to 20 miles an hour, and we have when we do look there now and again, we look at an iPad or some monitor above the controller.
yeah,
So
and
however, in favor of FPV, we were able to get significant sections in the BV loss arc to talk about FPV as a useful way to increase situational awareness. So
Mhm.
that's the right
Yeah.
place to start.
Yeah. Somehow we finally got that concept across in one place.
yeah,
So maybe we
and
can
it took
share
a
that.
long time.
Yeah. I don't. People, as soon as you put the goggles on and fly, especially with DJI or some HD system, you immediately realize, oh, I can see everything much more quickly, and I know exactly what's going on around me.
Well, and
Yeah.
here's the thing: is if you've never done, I recommend it if you haven't done the the Pilot Explorer thing. It's not super expensive. You get to go up in a Cessna or some other trainer type plane, and you get to experience what it's like to actually be in the pilot seat of a crewed
Crude
aircraft.
aircraft.
And yeah, I had to think of the
You
right
can't
term.
see anything.
Right.
You
Or
can't
hear
see
anything.
crap. Yeah, and so FPV, I mean, if you want to look and see what's behind you, there's a reason fighter jets have bubble canopies, guys. It's because they need to be able to see, but most airplanes do not have that. So if you want to be able to see behind you, good luck. And whereas an FPV aircraft can make a 180-degree turn in what? A quarter of a
Part of a
second?
second.
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
So-
and DFW FPV says that he identifies as two people. So may I please
with
steal that? Oh my God, that's why I started laughing a couple of minutes ago.
But aren't they
That's
both
fantastic.
wearing
Wait.
FPV goggles?
That's
Wait,
No,
how
no,
long
I identify.
can I have Chat GPT watch me? Is that
Most people have a dog that's a better visual observer than anyone else standing nearby
Sure.
them anyway.
Yeah.
But-
I'll have to just put a tennis ball on it on my drone, and dog will watch it,
Yeah.
chase it too.
What we
Go-
need to do
go
is
get it if I go down.
try to get more FPV employees to put on a pair of FPV goggles. We've been successful, especially Alex. You were at the AAAC meeting a while ago and got some of the AAAC members to fly some Emacs. Which model were they?
The Easy Pilot Pros.
Easy
or
Pilots?
Easy Pilot, yeah.
Yeah.
And then at Exponential was able to get most of the people in the FAA booth on Velocidrone
Nice.
too.
So
cool.
KBS Ken says, I think we need a web page with cut and paste words to send their senator along with contact. So that's what we were talking about earlier is getting our sticking points up. But here's the deal is cut and paste for contacting your
Congress
senators
is okay.
absolutely works.
Right.
On NPRMs, when we release
Not
something
so
on
good.
an NPRM, not so good. So what you can do, and for things like NPRMs, what we have done in the past, especially with remote identification, is we publish a document and then we encourage you to link to that document or add that document along with your own comments.
Which we
And-
would like to be polite, professional, and productive. Please.
Yes. So, but yes, when it comes to reaching out to your congresspeople and it comes to sticking points on the FAA Reauthorization Act, 100%. And that's what we were talking about earlier, that we are wrapping up work on, making sure our wording's correct, making sure we're hitting the issues that matter. And we will get that up on our website for a cut and paste. So feel free to utilize it.
Yeah, and even better,
Defund
use
the
what we have
FAA.
as a template and modify it to in your own words. Would be
Yeah,
would be great.
100%. Yeah. Let's see. My hands identify as eyes. There you go. I identify as less than a 250 gram drone.
As long
Love
as you're
it.
only doing it recreationally, that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Flying
identify as
aircraft.
flying indoors.
So
I
let's
only
see.
only flying indoors.
Okay,
Yep.
and Mr. Seabax has said that, don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but there's no need to comment on this. Been researching remote ID modules, and the current companies are
Yeah.
all non-US. Drone Tag and Aturian come to mind. Both are European Union. And I just point out that Josh Bixler, president of Flight Test, has said that Flight Test will have a solution targeted toward recreational. So there's a U.S. company.
Yep. So identify as the same as what Rotor Riot is trying to pull. That's
Yeah, the Rotor Riot. That's. Yeah, I think we chatted about that a couple of weeks ago. Not the
Yeah.
path we would have taken. If we had said inside, then they could have would have been a different path. Anyway.
with alarm
this
of aircraft in
situation-
range is
With the
No.
situational awareness of FPV and how we know that it's pretty safe, but the FAA still has to prove it their way. I wonder if there are any studies from FPS games where to describe the situational awareness of people in there, because that seems like it's more likely that that would have a study on it that could
Interesting.
be
That's
similar
not a bad idea.
to because that's very similar to what we experience with our racing or with our drones with FPV. And if we could take one of those studies to show how people can have excellent situational awareness in an FPS game.
That's an
What
interesting
is
point.
what's the rotation rate of like the turret on an APC or something? Like, is there like also some kind of equivalent with like some sort of military
That's
vehicle
not a
or
bad
something?
idea either.
You know?
I don't know, but that might be an interesting avenue that we could look at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Look at
Talk
you.
about a well-funded industry. They do a fair amount of research.
Yeah.
I've got a question
your
here.
thoughts
Had
on that,
anyone
Alex.
proposed the use of something like a flight radar application with an alarm of aircraft in range as an alternative to an observer?
Where's
So,
XJet?
He's over on
so,
YouTube right now.
so
He did
A-
work on
so
creating
ADS
something like that.
ADSB is explicitly prohibited from remote ID. However, in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee, we asserted that a crewed aircraft flying below 500 feet must have ADSB, squawk output. That allows all UAS to put an ADSB receiver on. They're small, they're pretty cheap, they do not have to be TSO'd. And that's exactly what's inside a lot of DJI drones today.
So I think
So
what
yeah,
they're saying
lots of
is
talk about that.
if you had something on you that would alert you to an aircraft in the area, then you could get out of the way. So why would you need remote
Well,
ID? But that's a totally like a different thing.
yeah, so keep that in mind. That's only one aspect of what a visual observer is supposed to do, right? Not only are they supposed to watch the skies, they're supposed to watch the area in which you're flying. So
Right.
if
Including
a small
ground
child
inspected.
runs through your racing field,
Layers of safety. You can't
right?
just strip it all out.
Birds.
So birds, animals, small children running into the middle of the racetrack, stuff like that you need to be aware of. It's not just the skies. So
And
I get where you're going with it, but
XJet saying over on YouTube that the ADSB alarm will be released as soon as the supply of Raspberry Pis improves, which I've been trying to buy some for work, and I have an alert that went off yesterday that said the store, the Adafruit place had 63 of them. And I refreshed the page and it was 42. And I refreshed the page and it was 20. I refreshed the page 5 and gone. Like within 1 minute, all of them were sold out. So
selling my Raspberry Pi 3 for $600.
They're starting to be available, but still going extremely fast.
Good God. That's
It's
May come
gonna
with
take
RetroPie
gonna
on.
take a while for the IT industry to catch up.
Yeah, for sure.
Right,
So
really.
all right, let's see. I feel that none of the regulators have ever flown FPV and not in a position to understand without actually flying. And that's something Alex is working on, but I would say the bigger issue is getting Congress people behind the goggles. 100%.
Just remember, government is full of people that haven't done the thing a lot of times because those are the people that end up in those positions. That's just sort of how this stuff goes. Very, 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 very often. So the best we could do, like we've talked about, is letting people understand positions of people who are doing this. And if you can genuinely speak to people about this stuff and get people interested, I really think a lot of these people will care. They just don't know how or why to care because they've never encountered it and have no reason to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Slarty says, "Geez, don't use that. I get shot on the internet in the back on COD all the time."
Yeah, and to the earlier point about getting folks, out. One of the two people that Alex got to fly FPV at a AC meeting was a chair of the AC, Houston Mills. So fighter pilot background, vice president of UPS, and chair of the AC. Very decent person, and there's someone who has an open mind. So great job by Alex, and I'm sure that that's someone that we could have a conversation with.
Yeah. To answer TextJet's questions, he says birds ? Yeah, birds. So I've had a couple run-ins with birds. There's also areas that are coming. I had a news article. It wasn't interesting enough to bring up, but now that you say it, where they're shutting down areas to drones because of, nesting birds. So, yeah, birds.
Basically all
Um,
hazards.
yeah. I hear an aircraft in the air and I'm below obstacles 99% of the time, which is what shielded operations is and something we've been pushing. Yeah, so
I have a
problem
weird
with
question.
restrictions
that
on my
maybe
patio door with my drone.
What's your question, Blinty?
So if I'm trying to comply with the law and I want to be cool with the law and stuff, and I'm 44-809, I'm flying under rec. Where I'm at now, I just moved here in Alabama. I'm close to Fort Rucker in Alabama, and they do a lot of helicopter flights. And there is like all the time there's a helicopter flying. What seems like 200 or 300 feet above my house, like like 3 times a week. So I'm wondering how do I find out there's nothing on the map when I look at lands that tells me there's any kind of special considerations for height. So, but obviously I'm going to be avoiding helicopters if I'm flying within my legal limit of 400 feet quite often. So is there some way I can see training I know on the map sometimes when I did 107 there are training patterns that are set there, but those are kind of they don't seem like
You
they're
could
always there and stuff. Is there somewhere I can know as the
you
pilot
call
what
the
to expect?
base.
Right,
you can call the
You can
base.
call the base, ask them what they can tell you about their missions, because they're not going to be able to
yeah,
tell you everything, but what
right,
see what you can get out of it just as a airspace situational awareness.
yeah,
The one you could also have it so that maybe if they're doing a mission near you, they could call you. I know before we went to Lance, when we had to call into the tower to get airspace approval for flight, once I called for approval, got approval to fly. 10 minutes later, I got a call back from the tower saying that I needed to land because there's going to be some low flying helicopter activity in my area. So
so
the tower I was near was able to communicate that
maybe
information for me.
maybe a better question then is something like that is something that could eventually be implemented into Lance, or how is there in the future? Is it always just going to be visual line of sight avoidance of these kind of things? Is there any
No.
way in the future,
Well,
Currently with Lance, it doesn't go to the towers unless you're doing something outside of the stock area. So
Right.
if you're inside the
Okay,
so it's a 400 so it's a 300-foot grid and you're doing 250 feet, the tower's not going to know about it. But if you're doing 350 feet and a 300-foot, the tower will get a notification to approve or deny it.
but that's only based on an airspace is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, and there's some good points in the chat, and also military aircraft do not have to squawk ADSB. Is that right?
I would imagine
so
that's correct.
sometimes they do. So to me, that would be a good question to
Yeah.
ask the folks on the base. Hey, I can procure an ADSB receiver. Just stay out of your way. Would that be of help? And if they're like, yeah, don't bother. Or
Right,
Here's
yeah,
something.
we squawk all the time.
right.
So here's something I just want to show. So this is the UAS facility maps. So I just pulled up Fort Rucker, right?
Yeah,
One of the things you can do, obviously the big red areas, those are your kind of your no-go areas. But if you click on a spot, it will give you the information, contact information, including phone numbers of who you can call,
gotcha.
that oversee those areas.
Okay,
And it'll give you it's showing this range, but it's not giving any kind of height information it shows over Napier Field, which is a local airport there. So
right.
but what you can do is reach out to the person of contact, and this is actually Karen's Army Airfield here, and it gives Mr.
So
Jerry Lewis his information here to reach
if you
out
click
for
if you
assistance.
click out of that circle, is there general information for the area or anything?
So
Because I'm not in a circle.
yeah, I
I'm
mean, if you're
south of
not,
that.
so I just clicked on the red box for Karen's Army
Yeah,
Airfield here. So if you
yeah,
click in Fort Rucker,
yeah. I'm
it
way
gives,
south of all that stuff, but I'm still getting a bunch of those flights over me at super
yeah.
low
So
altitudes,
I mean, technically, you would
way down
be,
there.
Yeah. So I mean, if they're doing overflights and whatnot, I would still reach out to them
Yeah.
and have a conversation. Be like, look, I want to be safe. I want you guys to be safe. I just want to make
think-
sure that we're all doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think the ADSB is a good idea too, at least to see,
Mhm.
what's there and stuff. And I'm sure there's different traffic there too, maybe like police helicopters or
Yeah.
whatever else is in the area. So
So, and the best information, Viches, for getting controlled airspaces is this UAS facility map. So this should be the map that Before You Fly and Aloft and everybody else utilizes to pull their data from, as long as they're getting the most current map. So I can't speak for Before You Fly. It should be using Aloft's data. I find Aloft itself to be more accurate, but that's just me. Um, yeah, so that's a great way to figure out, if you're doing the right thing. Phoenix, because of our weather, is we're inundated with airports, and we're also like the way that we're set up over here. Blunty, is you can see Luke Air Force Base actually has its own ceilings on it.
right.
And it also has, these are their vectors or their sectors that they do training in. So these
Gotcha.
are their overflight areas. So maybe it's just something that they need to get the information over to the FAA to update the UAS facility maps.
Right.
So, but Arizona is also, or Phoenix is also a massive pilot training area. So there's tons of different sectors, north and west. Generally not south, I don't think, but definitely east, west, and north. There's a bunch of training areas for student pilots. So yeah, so
Cool.
best source of information is right there. Contact info should be kept up to date. I believe these are updated quarterly. So
Every 56 days, I think.
yeah, something like that. So, yep. So, any other questions? Great topics tonight. Alex, we need to definitely look into your suggestion. I like that idea. That's a good idea. All right. Yep. All right. Well, with that, guys, I know we ran a little bit over. But I appreciate it. Slardy says, I wish Congress had set an FAA control floor in uncontrolled airspaces, say 200. It's silly to regulate drones lower than a kite or a tree line. Shielded operations, that's what we're going for. So something similar, not quite exactly that. But all right. Well, great having a conversation with you guys. Great questions, great topics. Really appreciate all the interaction. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, and
Yep.
we'll do it again.
For those of you
Bring
who
your
don't know, we
questions,
try
bring
to
your
do
comments.
this every other week on Wednesday nights. So if you want to know our regular schedule, that's what we're striving for. Unless weird holidays and stuff get in there, but
Yeah, but we're past all that.
we're good for every 2 weeks for quite a while.
Yep. 100%. All right, guys. Thanks. Y'all have a great one.
Thank you.